When I first played Shadows of Malice, I really disliked it. I would go so far as to say it made me angry. And usually, I don't stick with a game after I have that response. But that night, as I slept, my mind kept working over the game. It kept processing the rules. And I was playing out the game in my dreams and like in a semi-dream state almost. I know that sounds crazy, but if you've ever experienced the Tetris effect, I think it was very similar to that. So what happened next? I'm horror writer and board game addict J. Allen Riker, and today I'm telling you about my experience with the one-of-a-kind game, Shadows of Malice. So the next evening, when I played Shadows of Malice again, I had much more fun. My brain had worked a lot of things out. I wasn't having to flip back and forth nearly so much, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And then I played it again, and the gameplay got even smoother. And by the time I played it for the playthrough footage, it flows easily now. And at this point, despite my initial experience trying to learn the game, I actually imagine that it's a game that has a permanent place in my collection. And I know that's like a big jump. But I have to admit, it's not the best game I've ever played, and it hasn't earned its place because of that. But it's a very fun game that is currently unique. And because it doesn't have any event cards or any text pretty much whatsoever to encounter so often that I'll grow bored of it, it's always going to be a fun game to get to the table to play a few rounds every few months. That's what I'm predicting, at least. So in Shadows of Malice, you are avatars of light who will reform your bodies if defeated. In a kind of parallel dimension represented by a separate hex of hexes. There's a shadow realm, and there the avatars of shadow grow in strength every round, trying to break free, smashing against the gateways to get into the real world, where they will attack and destroy a light well, freeing Zulthul, the kind of king of the Shadow Realm. So let's get the negative out of the way first. I was trying to think of exactly how to describe the game, and I was looking through comments on Board Game Geek, and I found the word that I think perfectly encapsulates all of the negative aspects. I don't think it perfectly describes the whole game, but I think all of the negative aspects of the game can be summed up with this word: inelegant. So the game is not that complex, except for combat. But I had to print out player aid after player aid after reading the rulebook and really not being able to get much of a sense of the flow of the game from doing so. Now, I am pretty bad at learning games from the rulebook, but I think that a lot of people will have trouble learning this game straight from this rulebook. It's relatively long, and it speaks of things using the language of the mythology of the game. And it also describes things in kind of unintuitive, I would say inelegant ways. I printed out everything I could find to try to ease my confusion, and eventually it did. I didn't know where to find things. In the book, important pieces of information will show up once, and it's not necessarily in the place where you would intuit it to be. I had more luck finding it on all the player aids, but I was just kind of smearing them all over the place in front of me, like looking back and forth. And that was pretty much where my anger came from, that I was having to experience that. It's a frustrating feeling, like jumbling through a big stack of documents like that, small print, just trying to kind of find what you need at a glance. The thing about the game that I think also adds to the feeling of inelegance is that there are basically no visual reminders of how anything works. You get the one player aid, but when you look at the board, you don't know that you need to beat a luck roll of 4 to find a monster on any given tile. You don't know that there are a number of things that at this point I have memorized. When I pick the game up, I'm going to guess I'm going to have to look at them up again. And they're just buried in the rules. Then there's all the iconography. I like how it looks, but there are tokens all over the map. And as you're reading the rules, there are rules that refer to the strongholds. There are rules that refer to the gates. There are rules that refer to the lairs. And it's hard at the beginning. I actually had a hard time keeping straight what all of those things were. There are also cities, and on the back of each city, there's an icon, and you have to look that icon up to tell what sort of special advantage that city gives to you. There are mages, each of which have specialties, though the most important thing that they do is sell you potions. And on the back of each one of the mages is an icon that you need to look up to see what sort of mage service they can provide you with. The whole thing does not feel like modern game design with the quality of life advancements that we've grown accustomed to having. It feels like back when you owned like 2 games and you played it every single day, so of course you knew what the icons were. I remember playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition when I was a kid, and I just read the rulebook over and over again just for fun because there was no internet. And I lived out in the country with 2 television stations. So of course I just read my rule books over and over again. And this rule book feels like a throwback to one of those times. Now, then, like, the rules are constantly referring to CRs, LRs, MRs, PRs. These are each different types of checks. They're all rolls. But why the acronyms? Why not just say combat roll? Why not just say power roll? PRs come up so infrequently. Why make us remember that? It's like it's trying to be efficient, but for what reason? Like, there were very little other efficiencies added to this verbose rulebook. Why here in these terms? I had to, in some of the more ones that aren't used all the time, like check multiple times what they are. That doesn't save me any time, and it saves barely any space on the page. So you may be thinking that I'm just whining at this point, so I want to show you what I mean by inelegant. So these equations are in the rules. Using the D star, rolling a D star is essentially making an activation roll to see if something registers or not, such as an extra wound from +1 D star wound symbol. A D star has a 50-50 chance of landing. D star equals 0 on 1, 2, 3, or succeeding. D star equals 1 on 4, 5, 6. On average, 1 D star resolves to a value of 1/2. So D stars are used a lot through the game. But just reading this description is so unintuitive. In fact, I don't know why D stars exist. They resolve to a value of 1/2, and in combat, the new recommendation to speed it up is to just use 1 D star as 1/2. It makes it so that you can have a stack of binaries that you roll. And I'm not sure of all the mathematical implications. I know one is that if you have 6 D stars, it's like rolling a D6, except that it's also possible to get a 0. What does that really add to the game to create a term that nobody knows and that is constantly being mixed with whole numbers? And other types of die roll that are far more familiar, where there's no 0 at the base. It's not a binary. You're regularly rolling D2s and D3s, and I don't have a problem with that. This, I'm questioning the value of it, but I'm not a mathematician, so maybe there is something there that's a really great value. It's just a point that the game has some things that are confusing, and I'm not sure why. Let's read this description of getting soul shards. So soul shards are the crystals that allow you to use your special abilities. You can see in order to get soul shards, you have to beat creatures. You start out with some, but after that you get them through combat, and they are essential. So it is going to encourage you to go into combat at times when in between the monsters that are actually of consequence, the shadows. So when you beat a non-shadow creature or guardian, you can harvest a portion of the creature's fading life essence in the form of soul shards. Okay. An avatar may harvest X D star plus Y soul shards from a creature with X many life tokens and Y many abilities. The X D star soul shards will be colorless, and the Y soul shards will match the color of the creature's abilities. So you take the number of life tokens and you roll that many dice done in the binary style, and however many positives you get that many colorless, and then however many abilities the creature had, which are really nasty things that the creatures use to really powers that they use to really mess with you. They come in different colors, and you get a soul shard of each one of the colors of the abilities. I don't have that much of a issue with that whole concept. What I have an issue with is the fact that the formula, the equation XD star plus Y soul shards appears in a rulebook. That is inelegance. And then in the official FAQ, here is what may be the worst one about joining a band and what it does to movement points. So it teaches you if you have you'll have a single, so a band is when your characters join up together, which allows them to move together and fight together. Now, moving together is not a good thing. Fighting together is a good thing, because when you move together, you can only move as fast as the slowest, and when you fight together, you get to fight as hard as the highest roll. So this tells you how to mix those together, and when you're moving, when you are having one character join up with a band. And you see it's going through a number of little equations, and then it gets to the formula that this represents. The new band, band X plus avatar A, now has min 2, 4, with inputs 2 and 4, equals 2 movement points remaining this round. This is a function. I don't know that everybody knows what a function is. Why is this in the official frequently asked questions? I feel like there needs to be a frequently asked question about this entry. Okay, so those are the things that I found to be pretty inelegant. Another potential drawback of the game is that the combat is complex. It's probably more complex than it needs to be given the type of game that this is. I will say that when you watch other reviews, you'll find people talking about how long the combat is. My guess is that they were playing the first edition, where it did not give alternate combat rules, and where you actually had to roll the D stars every single time, and you could have a big old stack of sources of D stars. And now it gives you 4 different options to deal with those D star buffs and debuffs, and the one that I use is to take a half point each. Now, it doesn't make combat deterministic, because you're still doing your combat roll and and then you add in this now static number generated from the D stars, and you are comparing it to the creature's roll plus the static number of their bonus. And that makes it much quicker round from round. I would say it's a pretty massive improvement. I hope that I would have come up with doing that on my own, but I know that I would not continue playing this game if I had to do that much calculation every single turn. I will, though, say that having 4 different options for how to resolve combat could very easily overwhelm a person who really has no idea what's going on, which is how I felt when I first started playing this game. Combat is interesting. It's a clash. You are counting everything at the same time, and that is where it starts to feel, that's, I think, the source of why it feels complex and overwhelming. It's not so difficult when you're facing off against a weak monster, because all the buffs and debuffs are going to be coming from your stats, and so they're going to be coming from your potions, your masteries, But when you're facing off against a difficult monster that has their own buffs, their own abilities that are adding D stars to the chances to hit, the combat rolls and the damage rolls, and the damage amount, and you're subtracting those from each other and seeing how, and comparing them to see who comes out on top, that's when it can make your head spin a little bit. I definitely needed to write everything down. So you've got your buffs and your debuffs on chances to hit and be hit, and then your ability to cause wounds and absorb wounds. And the final result is a combination of whole numbers and these binary chances. So, like I said, I'm doing that through pencil and paper. I saw some videos where it seemed like people were doing it in their heads, and good for them. They are much better at math than I am. So all of that calculation that you did, it's only for one character, but you can spend a clear soul shard to kind of act aggro and draw the attention of the monster to a particular character. And that means that you don't have to recalculate it every time. So guess what I did every single combat roll where the creature didn't roll to attack my combat character? I spent that clear soul shard because I was not going to calculate all those buffs up for every single character. What that also, though, let me do was it let me specialize. And because you can hand potions and gear back and forth, the system kind of encourages you to specialize. You give the best buffing potions and gear to whoever has the best combat mastery. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Those are the negatives out of the way. And now I'd like to talk about the positives of the game, because for me, those negatives mostly are on the front end during the learning experience, while I feel that the positives are throughout the game and give the game a long life during which those positives continue to outweigh the drawbacks of your initial learn. So let's talk about the components. It's hard to see, but the cardboard is really good. It's a very dense cardboard. As far as the art goes, I feel that the art is going to be divisive. I like the art. I think the art is weird and fun. So let's talk about one of the most important things in the game, the loot. You already saw one side. You have a very healthy deck, and it feels like it matters. They give you big powers, and even when they just give you like an addition, some like the weapons and the armor gives you an addition to, it gives you a buff to your combat and debuffs to your enemy combat, they still feel powerful. Those numbers add up and they really, really matter. It's funny how much it feels like they matter, especially when you don't know how powerful of a creature that you're going to be rolling up. The potions are essential. They are evocative, they have great names, they spur your imagination, and if you do not have them when you get into a big combat, you will not win that combat. That adds a really nice press your luck aspect to this. The shadow is just growing stronger and stronger in the shadow realm every round. But you need loot, and you definitely need potions. Now, to buy the potions, you're going to need crystals, which means you're going to have to fight. So you're probably traveling to lairs where you can get treasure and you can get crystals at the same time, because lairs, stocked lairs, have treasure. They're guaranteed to have treasure, whereas creatures otherwise are definitely not guaranteed to have treasure. So you're trying to gear up, but as you are, the shadow is growing stronger and stronger, and you also need to get to those light wells and get to the fortresses. See, and I can't even remember what they're called, and defeat the guardians at those fortresses, which are extra strong monsters that are probably going to sap your resources because those potions are one-time use. And you need to be opening those wells up and finding the light wells, because that's how you win, is by finding every tile has 3 wells. One of them is going to be a light well, although they might not all be on, they might not be split evenly between the tiles, because you mix them up and put them all over. So there's a nice rhythm to the game and a nice ramp up, that even though the game does not have any leveling, and even though any monster can be a complete beast, because you're not leveling, that's what makes that part feel fair. And yet it's like total chaos. It's like a thrill when you throw the dice. So in order to create a monster, you roll 3 dice and you figure out what it is, depending on what sort of hex you're on. You figure out the power of it. Depending on how you roll the dice, they can be much more powerful. And you figure out the how many abilities they have. So you can see here, these are guardians. So guardians are always very powerful. So I played with 3 characters every time, as I said, and when you do that, the way that you generate your heroes is essentially you draw masteries. There are 18 masteries. They each give you a power, and they each, because of how they encourage you to develop your character, they feel very different. So you saw the Gatecaster. Such an important power. You always want to have this guy banded up with everyone else, because he can, from any point on the map, teleport to any gate. When a shadow pops up, it's going to show up on a random gate. This is the guy that's going to get you there. Your battle strategist, now he's got a buff to hit. He's probably going to be the guy who, and he can spend a crystal to get an even stronger buff. He's probably going to be the guy that you're sending into combat. So he's going to be the one who you're handing your buffing potions and your combat items to, whereas somebody who's not suited for combat is going to get potions that are like explosive and do damage, because they can throw those before the fight, while your guy who's having to take on the monster directly and take those hits is taking a buffing potion, because you can only have one for free, one free turn before the combat begins. So the masters each have that passive bonus, and they each have a bonus that's gained by spending a color soul shard. And in this game of clashing combat and ticking clocks, these powers are both very useful and very expensive. And so it's weird, like it's kind of amazing. I can see why the person who created this also put a bunch of functions, literal functions, and a bunch of equations into the rules. They have this thing balanced out, even though it's total chaos, and it might hit you in such a way that does not feel balanced in any given game on any given round. Honestly, it's, I think, pretty impressive. So there's extremely little explicit narrative and no narrative events. This is an overland adventure game that doesn't have narrative cards that you draw. There are fate cards that you draw at certain points, and when you roll doubles to move, and they can really help you or really hurt you. There are these monsters that appear in layers, and they can be weak and easy or huge and terrifying. And the shadows can emerge and start hunting down the fortresses that defend the light and shadow wells, trying to bring Zthul into the world. And so with all these events happening organically and based on random chance, like it doesn't need the explicitly written narrative events. Instead, those things just kind of organically happen. And every time, something different can happen. The behavior of the shadows might be that a bunch of weak shadows just keep emerging because you keep rolling the dice in such a way that they move onto the open shadow gates and they pop up on random tiles in the world. And you might spend a bunch of time playing whack-a-mole trying to jump from map tile to map tile to stop these shadows before they bring Zthul into the world. Or you might keep rolling for the shadow in such a way that the shadow lingers in the shadow zone, gaining hit points the entire time until it's so powerful that when it does finally come out, it seems like it's unstoppable. But you've also been growing in power as you travel the board, and you've been shutting down the number of areas that it can move to. So you've got it because it's going to be going towards those unsealed wells, and you can better predict its movements and thus have more control. So you see, each one of these things that I said, a powerful shadow escapes from the shadow realm. a weak shadow escapes from the shadow realm, and then the next 2 rounds, weak shadows escape from the shadow realms, appearing on different tiles. Each one of those could have been an event card, but instead, the randomness of the game creates its own story, creates its own events, and it's going to be a different story every time. There are no narratives to say, oh, I've read this again, I know how it goes, I know which choice to make. Shadows of Malice is the archetype of an adventure game. Not in that it's the original, obviously, because it came out in like 2014, but in that it's like the distilled essence of an adventure game. And out of it, many variations can arise from the same box. At this point, maybe you're more swayed by the positive things that I just said, but I spent quite a bit of time ranting about the negatives at the beginning. So at this point, if you're weighing both of those, you might just be confused. And I have to say that I came out of this a little bit confused too. There are definitely games where I play where I say, nope, nobody should be spending their time with this game, or only people who like very specific things. There may be a few people who for some obscure reason like it more, but this, and this game in the same subgenre do it better. There are going to be times where I'm like, this game's awesome, and anyone who likes this genre of game, and even people who don't, will like it. This game, I don't know. I can't just give it a flat-out recommendation, even though I said that I'm keeping it in my collection, probably permanently. I'd have to ask you specific questions. How okay are you with randomness? Are you okay with a more difficult than necessary learning experience? Are you okay with being presented with the outline of everything, right? Heroes, gear, monsters. Like once you get into the game, there's literally zero flavor text. It all lives in the rules, which after a while you hopefully won't have to reference. And if you print out enough player aids, you'll never have to reference. Like, do you feel like the fun stories are going to pop out of that for you? They don't automatically for me in every game, but in this game, they do, in that the games just feel different. So it's not like I'm stopping and reading something and then saying, oh, this is what's happening. It's just that the game feels like something very different is happening at any given moment. I would say if you love overworld adventures and this game sounds appealing, as long as you can push through the learning games, I do think that you'll enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, I think that this game will stay on your shelf because you're not going to wear it out. This is the like diamond hard core of adventure games. If you decide that you do want this game, it's a very reasonable price from what I've seen. It's not hard to get, and it's like $40 to $45 USD. First of all, I was surprised that the box is literally crammed full when I put everything in it. I am using like a Plano box to organize all the tokens, but it's a little one. The other thing is that all the components do so much work. So I'd say print yourself a bunch of the player aids, print some mats, print out the creature cards so that these actually do have flavor text on them. So I guess this does add a little that would otherwise only live in the rulebook. They'll tell you what buffs the different levels get, and they'll just give descriptions of the types. And suffer through what might be a difficult learning process. Some of you are going to hop on here and tell me how easy it is. I know it. I just know it. But that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, just get through the learning of the game, and I think that you'll have a keeper. Now, if you don't like just having this outline of what's going on and you need external thematic material added through art and through bits of fiction or big chunks of fiction, then yeah, you very well may not like this game. You might, but I wouldn't say buy it and find out. Anyway, that is my review of Shadows of Malice. I hope that it helps, and let me know if you get it and what you think about it in the comments. That's it from me. Have a great day and keep playing solo.